Welcome, I'm Darren, and join me as I try to explore what in the world's going on with cards right now. And for the record, right now is early spring of 2021, so basically we've been locked indoors for about a year now. It's pretty much the anniversary of the COVID lockdown. So in the course of the last year, we've had a tremendous explosion in card values, box rips. The prices have gone out of control. The spending, it's crazy, and grading is really nothing that is going on right now has ever been seen or has ever really been fathomed before. And so we're all trying to get a grasp of what's going on. And I wanted to kind of lay out the different elements that I recognize and try to figure out what the best that I can to figure out what's going on. And I am an historian, and so I understand that there's no way for you to really see what's going on. You have to spend some time afterwards to really see what all the pieces were and to put them together. So I'm not doing this to create a final understanding. I'm doing this to try to grasp what is going on around us and to get kind of a feel for what's coming up down the road. So that's kind of what I'm going to be doing. And this is more of a discussion than anything else. I'm not sitting here saying these are all the pieces. This is the solution. What I'm saying is this is what I see. This is what I've got. And so I want to have a healthy discussion about this. And I'm going to throw out a couple of terms that might end up becoming the era term for this time and toward the end of the video. And I'd really like to hear your thoughts on how you think that these different terms really fit, which ones are probably the most accurate. So the first thing is what is going on? What are the things that we're seeing? Well, the two main things that we're seeing are, one, boxes are being ripped at a ridiculous rate, and the cost of the boxes is going up a lot. And the other thing we're seeing is a tremendous interest in graded cards. Now, graded cards isn't new. They've been around for a couple of decades, and they've been valued for this whole entire time. But right now, the fixation on it has been, it's completely incomparable. And so these two elements are basically the foundation of the chaos that's going on, but they're not really, there's got to be reasons behind it. So in terms of the box ripping itself, that's a large part of that is based upon YouTube. So there are a lot of people who are putting up new YouTube channels or have had YouTube channels for a while, and they want to rip boxes in order to get audience or basically to put out content. And I'd love to be able to sit here and say that I have nothing to do with this, but I do have to acknowledge that I've ripped a couple of boxes. I did it not because, personally, I don't like box ripping videos. To me it's boring, but I've done a few in order to try to get some audience members. Didn't work. And I have shifted them to something else that I like to think is different, is better, but I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm not a part of this. I mean, I did start my channel within this whole time span. So I am going to acknowledge right out front that I do have a little bit of involvement in this. So it's just being honest, but basically that is a key element to it. It's creating a huge draw for getting new boxes to be opened. But that's not the only thing, because the grading element is the other component that really drives all of these boxes values going up. And with the grading element, what it is primarily is people who are trying to go out and find that really rare card that hasn't been discovered, hasn't been pulled out of a pack, or if it has, it hasn't been preserved. And so they're going out trying to rip boxes to find a super rare card in terms of not so much that the card itself is rare as much as the quality is rare. You're trying to go out and get a 10 gem mint of something. And there's a mentality that is involved with that we've never seen in card collecting before. So I want to step back from even that and go to another level down, which is, who are the people doing it? So to go back to the box ripping, this appears to be largely people who are not involved with the boxes that are being ripped. Well, there are new boxes that are being ripped, but then there's also older boxes that are being ripped by people who are kind of discovering it for the first time. Myself, I ripped these boxes 30 years ago. I was ripping these boxes and seeing them fresh and new at that time. And then over the next 30 years, I lived with these cards. For crying out loud, I have given away tens of thousands of these cards, literally given them away, because why would I buy one of these boxes? I've been getting rid of the cards. And so my mentality is, what value is there? But that's because I've lived it. I've gone through the process. But for somebody who never did, it gives them the opportunity to sit down, open a box, find out what it's like to get these cards. And there's an excitement that goes along with it. So it is new to an audience that wasn't a part of it at the time. So there is a newer audience that isn't necessarily younger. Maybe it's younger, maybe it's older, but never was involved with it, that is discovering in that way. Now, there's another mentality that goes into box ripping, box opening on YouTube that is just not a part of my mental scope. I just don't get it. So I respect that. I'm not going to get into that because I am curious about the other elements of ripping boxes in that way. But to go back over to the investment side, the people trying to pull these cards out for grading, there's a very different mentality between somebody who opens, from a collector like myself, who opens packs in order to put together sets or put together teams. There's a different mentality between us and those people who look at a box as a potential to find 2 or 3 cards. And if you're talking about inserts, then we collectors get that as well. But the idea of going out and buying a box of 9091 Fleer in order to get the Jordan, and specifically trying to get the Jordan in perfect shape so that you can get it graded as a 10 gem mint, that is a mentality that doesn't make sense to a long-time collector, because we're looking at all the rest of the cards in the box trying to figure out, to us, that's the value of the box is, yes, there are Jordans in there, those are the highlights, but the whole thing is the box. And so it begs the question, all right, so when you rip the box, what do you do with the rest of the cards? And this is where I think we've got a really big challenge on our hands in terms of really grasping what's going on right now, because that mentality is based more on the world of gambling, somewhat with investing, but more with gambling. The idea that you're going out just trying to find that one card. And so if you look back at when all of this started, it pretty much started about the time that we all got locked indoors. But not only did we get locked indoors, which gave people more time to look around at their cards and get interested in them. Yes, that is an aspect. But I think something more important happened, which is sports stopped. And when sports stopped, so did fantasy sports. Now, fantasy sports is, let's face it, gambling. That's what it is. And it's throwing a lot of money out there hoping to get a big windfall. And if you don't get the big windfall, you walk away. You just go, okay, well, that was no big deal, because your entire focus is getting that big windfall. And so when fantasy sports stopped, you still have sports-minded people who have been used to throwing tons of money around looking for big chunks of return. And the only thing that remained in sports was basically the world of memorabilia. So I have a feeling that a huge portion of the fantasy sports community basically looked over at cards and decided, well, look at the investment side of that, and grabbed a hold of that and started to make a run at finding the big investments out of that. Now, you also have investors proper who have been getting more involved in cards over the last couple of years. And that's another thing I'm kind of fascinated with, and it's another thing I can't explore because I can't quite grasp why there's been so much interest. But with the fantasy sports community, that would explain why so much money has been dumped into the hobby, because right now in the hobby of card collecting, there has been an insane amount of additional money that has been flooded in. And it would also explain why the card values skyrocketed. I mean, just absolutely went through the roof. The idea that a 1990-91 Michael Jordan 10 gem mint card could be worth potentially thousands of dollars. A year ago, people would have laughed at you. It wouldn't have made any sense to even propose the idea, but now for some reason it makes sense. And so that very much fits with the gambling mentality of trying to, throwing all your cards out there, trying to get that one rarity that nobody else has. And that would also justify why people would be willing to spend, say, $500 on a box of cards that, for me, I wouldn't have spent $15 on a year ago. But for somebody to do that, knowing full well that in all likelihood they're only going to get $20, maybe $30 in cards out of the box, but they could get a windfall of $1,000, that's gambling. And that is a gambling mentality that is at its height. And I really do believe that that is the foundation of why the card boxes on the grading side have skyrocketed so high. Now, the grading side is its own phenomenon. It's been around for decades, and for many of us, we have been kind of confused by the grading phenomenon because, we get the reason for it. We get why people are interested in it, but when you're not focused on a couple of super valuable cards, but you're interested in sets, you're interested in teams, when you're interested in putting together large collections like that, A graded card makes no sense because it's locked away in a case. You can't put that in a binder. You can't put it in a box of cards, whatever. You have to pull it away, put it separately in a box that's cumbersome. You don't even get to look at it. You could take 2 or 3 of these graded cards and put them on stands somewhere and just kind of have them as part of your furniture. Sure, you could do that. But otherwise, it becomes almost kind of useless for a collector. Now, for high-end, super high-end collectors, it does make sense. So that's always been kind of the space. But now there's this fascination with graded cards where it has taken on a whole new dimension. And this has been in just the last couple of years. And again, in the last year, it's taken off to an absurd level. One of the problems that you get when you have this much stuff graded is the rarity starts to drop. Because when you start off, you have 2, maybe 3 cards that are graded 10 gem mint. Great. Well, once people are flooding the market with as much of this as you can, now you're getting 5, 10, maybe 20 cards that all have that level. And now the rarity is going to cause the value to start to drop, and drop pretty dramatically in some cases. But also, there is an investment bubble side to it, and that is going to be a critical aspect of how all of this shapes out. So another element is the investment side, and not just investors as we've seen over the last couple of years, but the investor/gambling combination. So with investors, you have 2 kinds of investors. You have core investors, and then you have speculators. And speculators are the people who tend to really run prices up. They either will do it like GameStop, where they actually push it up, or they'll just figure out an area that's probably going to be exploited, and they run in and they're tripping over each other trying to get in and get as much and get to the right spot where they feel that it's now maxed, and then you're going to let the investors take over, and then the regular schmucks who don't know any better are going to get left holding the bag. With a bubble, what you get is you get all the speculation and the frenetic investment. You get all that going on as it goes skyrocketing in the air, but what you've got is speculators and investors buying from each other, selling to each other, and then when they give up, that's when you start to see it round off, and then it falls. So when it falls, what you get is what's called a market correction, which basically means it's falling back down to the people who care. The speculators and investors, well, the speculators don't care. The investors do care, but they care about the activity that's going on. They don't care about the base end of the day value. In the world of card collecting, when that market correction drops, what you're going to have is you're going to have some investors, but you're also going to have collectors. Collectors are the foundation of it. The whole reason that card has value is somebody has a Michael Jordan collection. They have a Chicago Bulls collection, or they have a collection of basketball cards and they're missing that Jordan card. How desperate are they to buy that card? They've got all the other cards, they need that. And the desperation level, that is the mark at which the market correction will ultimately fall down. Now, a correction can drop a bit and then investors and speculators get back in. And you can have a bit of a roller coaster, but when it really balances out is basically when the core collectors, the people who want to be the end of the line for that card, when they're finally willing to look and say, okay, yes, I'm willing to spend that money. So it's going to be interesting to see how this bubble ends up finishing. And if you think that it's going to finish where it started, I have bad news for you. Every time that a major change like this happens, it's exactly that, it's a change. You have new perspectives, new voices, and new money does affect the final result. So when we went in, we had evolved card collecting to a certain point. It had become a certain thing that had been from a couple of different changes. Right now we've got some chaos going on, and at the end of the chaos, it's going to look different at the end than it did at the beginning. That's just the way it's going to be. It's probably not going to look that different, but it will look a little bit different, primarily because of the new people contributing, the people who are coming in with fresh new ideas, fresh new perspectives. And so I'm really intrigued to see what that's going to be like. Obviously, I'd like for it to look like it did before, but I liked it the way it was before that and the way before that. You know, this happens. These changes happen, and I find my little nook, the area that I like to occupy, and as long as I can stay in my little toy box, I'm perfectly fine. So it is going to be interesting to see how that works. It's far more interesting to see where the values are going to end up, and also to see how grading ends up shaping out. A lot of people right now are going to be learning that grading is not the end-all result. I remember in the early days of grading, people would take, say, an Anthony Peeler card, send it in to get it graded, and then get it back and find that nobody wanted to spend $10 to $20 on an Anthony Peeler card no matter what the grading was. So they wondered what they spent all the money for. And for those of us who were cynical about grading, our thought was, what did you expect? It's an Anthony Peeler card. But even for valuable cards, that's the case. You send a card in and it comes back graded 8. You may have just damaged the value of the card. So for a lot of people, they're spending a lot of money and then now learning that just because you send it off to be graded doesn't make things better. Sometimes it makes it worse. You got to make sure you know why you're doing it. And also with a lot of grading, you're going to flood the market. And you're going to find out either one, that you have too many of a certain card and so now they've dropped the value, or you're just putting too many graded cards out there and the graded market is more focused than the whole expanse of what's being graded. So there's a lot that's being learned right now by the people who are grading cards. There's a lot that's going to be learned by people who are buying and selling cards. And there's a lot that's going to be learned by people who are opening boxes. So all those things are kind of going on at the same time, which makes it a really big, confusing mess. And again, we don't know how it's going to evolve at the end, whether there's going to be a major crash in grading or whether we're going to end up ripping too many boxes and kind of getting it out of our system, or whether we're going to flood the market with content, product, because it's amazing how much junk wax boxes are now being opened up. And it begs the question for people now discovering it, the same question we had all these years back, which is, okay, now you got those cards, what are you going to do with them? And on top of that, if you spend $800 on 6 boxes of cards, you open them up and you get $150 worth of cards, are you going to just write that off? Are you going to hold on to the valuable cards and try to get your money back? It's a big mess, and we're all going to have a lot of fun trying to figure our way out of it, which begs the question, so what is this era going to be called? So I've been playing around with some ideas, and I got a couple of ideas that were proposed in my junk wax video. And so I wanted to throw a couple of these ideas out and kind of get your feel for what you think. So basically I got 4 different ideas. One of them is the gambling era. And this one really is predicated on the fantasy sports component which goes into it. So this may be one where I'm stretching it a little bit too thin, but to me I really do feel that gambling is kind of the foundation of the chaos that we've got. Then there's the investment bubble era, and investment bubble era is, I like that one a lot. Again, I don't think it quite gets to the core of it, and we'll have to see what the bubble ends up being like and how that it affects everything, but it doesn't quite address the box ripping that is going on. Then there are 2 more that are very similar, which is grading era or junk grading era. And I would love to take credit for junk grading era, but that's the one that I just received in a comment that I think is probably the strongest that we've got. And so even though grading era and junk grading era are pretty much the same term, I wanted to toss them both out there kind of as one, because again, we gotta make sure that we see how grading shapes out, because it could be that grading the prices will drop off, but that it'll maintain a very strong presence. So we'll see about that. But then I wanted to do another one which was basically like YouTube era or the box opening era, which would be, I think that's a little too focused as well, but it's another one I just kind of wanted to toss out. So at the end of the day, this is just what I've been able to gather up until this point and kind of put together. I'm really, really, really curious to hear your perspectives on it, your different views of it, pieces of information that I don't have or haven't talked about here that you think are important, and where you think the emphasis is. And also trying to get a better understanding of the different people who have come in and helped to form the market as it is today. So please, by all means, let me know in the comments below, and we'll do the best that we can to figure it out. So I hope that you enjoy this video. Definitely check out other videos that I've done. Subscribe if you haven't done so already, and thank you very much for watching.